leadership is moving from kind of a skills-based or knowledge-based authoritarian position into that heart-centered leadership role where it's more about connecting with the people in your team and your vendors and everyone you work with on a deeper level. And I think we're seeing that with this great resignation going on. Workers don't want to be a number. They don't want to just show up and make widgets all day without some kind of connection.
Hello, and welcome to episode 109 of the Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence podcast. I'm your host, Brittney-Nichole. Today, we'll be speaking with Matt McLaughlin. Matt McLaughlin has over 25 years of experience building high-performance teams and leaders with specialties in fostering emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and communication skills. Matt helps CEOs, founders, managers, and leaders increase their impact on people, planet, and profit. Matt has worked with leaders in Roche Pharmaceuticals, U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, Dannon, LinkedIn, and many natural product companies. A longtime meditation practitioner, Matt emphasizes conscious, mindful leadership and business practices that benefit all. Matt is an associate certified coach through the world's largest and most respected coach certifying agency, the International Coaching Federation, or ICF. It is a pleasure to bring Matt to you today. I also want to note, and I will mention this later in the podcast, but Matt is also a listed EI specialist in Emotional Intelligence Magazine. You can go to ei-magazine.com and find more about him there. I will provide the link in the description notes below. That said, quick announcement. So I am the chief editor of Emotional Intelligence Magazine, and we are looking at transitioning this podcast into Emotional Intelligence Magazine podcast, or EIM Plus, sometime in early spring 2022. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be doing a lot of new things, and we will keep you posted. But without further ado, here is Matt McLaughlin. All right. Well, Matt, welcome to the Living and Leading with Emotional Intelligence podcast. It is great to have you. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Before we get started, I always ask for my guests to introduce themselves to our listeners and viewers. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, I'd be happy to, and thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
My name is Matt McLaughlin, and I am the CEO and founder of Illustra Consulting. And I help business owners, leaders, and entrepreneurs get unstuck. And by that, I mean there's so many people out there that want to make a difference in the world, that want a better society or the environment or the planet, and they've got a great business idea, and they find themselves in a place where they get stuck. They either they need to learn some leadership skills to build their management team, or they don't have the confidence to go forward with something. And that's where I help them. I really help them bring that vision for a better world and a better society to life.
Yeah, and I really enjoy hearing people's stories of how they got into the field that they're in. And you can tell when somebody gets into it because it's just, oh, well, that's what everybody else is doing. But you can definitely tell the difference with someone that has a true passion and connection to their craft or service. And in our discussion together, I definitely got that passion and connection from you. So would you mind just sharing how you got into the space of conscious leadership / self-awareness / emotional intelligence, if you will?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I would say about 25 years ago, I was in the middle of building my career in marketing, working for a couple of startups. This was the dot-com era, and a lot of opportunity. So was with one particular company, and I started having really bad panic attacks and anxiety, and really felt like I was being undermined, or that I wasn't. I kind of had this imposter syndrome, like I'm not I don't deserve to be here. I don't have the experience. I don't have the qualifications. There's other people that are better, so on and so forth. And I really worked myself into a knot with it, and got into some therapy, and through that process discovered meditation, and actually a couple years after that became a Buddhist and have been practicing that and meditation for about 20 years now. And it occurred to me at the time that there was no bridge between the two, that these things I was learning with Buddhism and with meditation about myself were really applicable to the business environment and my career. And at the time, there weren't any really resources to explore that. So I kind of let it go and went on with my career and my practice. And probably 6, 7 years ago, I took a leadership program at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, which was really my first experience with the melding of a mindfulness practice with business. And it was like a door opened, and I said, wow, this is amazing stuff. And this is really lighting me up. I can really get into this. And I was at a company at the time where it was welcome, and the bringing in of a mindfulness practice and self-awareness and emotional intelligence into the workplace was really encouraged, and it was a very strong environment for that. And over time, I realized what I really was enjoying more was the helping people develop and helping teams develop, rather than the marketing work that I had been doing for 25 years. So I went through a coaching program, became a certified coach through the ICF, and continued to work on the leadership development skills and teaching those to others. And here we are today.
That's great. So a few things that I want to unpack there. And you mentioned, and thank you for, sharing your story and also being vulnerable about, experiencing those panic attacks and going to therapy. I think even today, it's still not widely accepted for a lot of leaders to admit that they are seeking help for things like panic attacks and anxiety, because we live in a society that tells us that we're broken if we experience these things, when the reality is we're just not aware of what is triggering those things, and that we can manage them with things like practicing meditation. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'm going to let you decide which direction out of these things that I bring up you want to kind of dive deeper into. But the other thing is, I hear a lot of people say, well, mindfulness, meditation, I'm either not religious, or I see that as being a conflict with my existing beliefs. Maybe they're not Buddhist. So how would you, both of those are technical untruths, right? But how would you address that to someone that may be listening that either feels like therapy means that I'm broken, I shouldn't do that, and if I practice these things like meditation, I'm going against my beliefs, or it's just not part of my beliefs?
Sure. Yeah. Great questions. There's this stigma around therapy, and especially with leaders, and especially with leaders letting the people they're leading know that they're in therapy or they're working on something. And it's so counterintuitive to creating an environment of trust and safety in an organization, that for a leader to show that level of vulnerability, that's where it all starts, really. I mean, you don't have to share everything or every single problem you're having, but everyone that you're leading is going to need a support system. And that can look like a therapist, a coach. You might have a nutritionist, you might have a fitness coach, or any level of support that's helping you get where you want to go. And that's really what we all need. I mean, none of us get to a certain age in life without having some issues and some backstory that needs to be unpacked, either through therapy or working forward through coaching. And I think that first admitting that's part of the process and that's part of where a
Mm-hmm.
leader is, that's going to open up that level of trust in the organization incredibly well.
I love your analogy. So I'm going to interject just for a second because what you said, I think, was a great example. And it goes back to just the way our society is structured. We're not ashamed to say we have a fitness trainer. In fact, a lot of people boast about, I've got a personal trainer, or boast about having a nutritionist or something along those lines, that type of coach. Yet mental health is seen so differently than physical health, but it's one and the same, right? Like it's no different. You are looking to better yourself. You're looking to develop that, hone in on that awareness so you know where you can improve upon certain skills or mindsets, and you have that person to help guide you. I think that's really well said and very relatable to some people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, there is that fear of sharing too much,
Mm-hmm.
um, and there is a line there to
There is.
cross, but the sense that, yeah, I can't do this on my own, and I don't have all the answers, and I'm not perfect. I'm a work in progress. Those are all values that
Yeah.
a leader wants to instill in his team. Like, ask for help when you need it. Don't think you know
Mm-hmm.
all the answers when you don't. It's okay to not know. All of those things, and all of that goes right back up to the top of a company, and that's how you start creating that kind of inquisitive culture of curiosity and
Right.
innovation. I mean,
Right.
that's really where it all starts.
It's about modeling that behavior. You're right. There is a very fine line there with what you share and what you don't share. And I've also seen managers who share everything about what they talk about with their therapist to the point that their employees become their therapists because they're just reiterating everything again and telling their employees all their problems. And like you're saying, to be emotionally intelligent and vulnerable is to only disclose what you feel like is going to benefit the other person, not just you, right? Venting to someone is benefiting you, it's not benefiting them. So if you feel like you need to display vulnerability to make someone else feel comfortable to be vulnerable themselves, then that is a benefit for them, right? And I think that's where that distinction is. Who is it benefiting?
Yeah, exactly. And it comes down to intention. And, if you can ask yourself, why am I saying this? Then you can figure out pretty quickly, is it for me or is it for them? And do I really need to share that much to get the point across that it's okay to ask for help?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a fine line.
And your therapist was the one who encouraged meditation, correct? That's how you got into meditation?
Yeah, it was actually just like a guided body relaxation meditation. It was on a cassette tape. It was like a 10-minute thing, and I really enjoyed it and looked into, well, where did that come from? What's the history behind that? And discovered, Buddhist meditation. And here in Boulder, Colorado, we've got one of the largest Buddhist organizations in the world, and
Mm.
was fortunate to join up there and get some incredible teachings and learnings. So it was kind of like one of those you know doors open for me, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And everybody finds it in their own way, right? So you can meditate and be any religion, non-religion, doesn't really matter. The whole premise of meditation is to be present and focused and connected. Would you agree? I wouldn't say I'm a practicing anything. I take kind of things from different places. So I'm not as well versed in it as you are. But would you say, I mean, how would you define the purpose and practice of meditation?
I would say that the intention is to develop a clear mind where you can make decisions with intentionality, that aren't based on emotion, that are thought out. They're not reactive, they're proactive. I think there's a huge component of self-awareness to meditation, where you're watching your thoughts and discovering your own processes and what keeps recurring in the self-talk and
Mhm.
all of these things. So it's an ongoing process of self-discovery, really. And what I how I teach that, both in classes and with companies and with individuals, it's completely non-denominational. There is no mention of religion. I don't think there's anything in the process itself that wouldn't fit with any of the major religions. In fact, there's John Kabat-Zinn has been doing some incredible work for decades on mindfulness-based stress reduction, and it's very, very well thought of in a lot of circles. There's absolutely no religious components to it. It's really just a process of watching your own thoughts and like you said, coming back to the present.
Yeah. And I'm probably going to dig myself into a hole that I can't get out of, or open a can of worms that I shouldn't have opened, but I'm going to, because I think it's important to address it. I am very much in this space of mindfulness, and more of the, I guess, Eastern philosophies, right? I was raised in a Christian home, and I've made my own decisions about faith since then. But I've heard, and it's, to me personally, and this is my opinion, I find it disturbing that specifically the Christian religion recently has been labeling things like meditation and yoga as being demonic. I don't know if you've heard that. It's something new that I've heard, but they're saying that all new age, which meditation and yoga falls into that new age-iness. And yeah, they're saying that it's a gateway to demonic possession. Um, and I bring this up because we have to be so careful about the information that we communicate. And I understand that many of us are driven by fear. And I don't think any religion is inherently good or bad. I think it's the people within religion, whatever it may be, not even within religion. You think politics, you think any system of beliefs, anywhere that a human being has their hands on it, we're going to find a way, the ego is going to find a way to manipulate things. And I think what is going on, it's not Christianity as a whole. I think it is a lot of leaders within that denomination or faith that is seeing people find these more holistic approaches. And instead of seeing how they can integrate that into their belief system, they see it as a threat. And so for any, excuse me, for anybody listening or watching, this is an attack on religion. I didn't intend necessarily for it to go this way, but I felt that I needed to bring this up because I'm hearing more and more about this. And we have to be very careful not to be led by fear, because there's so much research that shows that meditation and yoga and all of these new age practices, or many of them, have scientific evidence that they help boost connection and love and self-awareness and reduce stress and anxiety. To me, I don't see how evil, if you're religious, how that can fit into that. So I know, Matt, I'm sorry. I dug this and I drug you into this hole with me, and you don't have to comment on this, but that's something I felt like I needed to say. You don't have to comment on it. We can move on to conscious
No,
leadership, but
I'm actually happy to, because I think this can segue perfectly into that it's kind of that attitude of, if you were a leader in a company, say you're managing a team of 10 or 15 people, and one person in the team says, "Hey, I have this great idea," and it's something you hadn't heard of before, that was maybe a little bit of fear of the unknown, and maybe a little bit of, wow, this person on my team is really smart. Are they after my job? So
Mm-hmm.
all that fear starts coming up. And is that what you really want on your team and in your company, where new ideas are shut down and people's voices can't be heard, new things can't be thought of because of
Right.
some fear of the status quo? That's really a very outdated leadership modality, and I think we're seeing that clearly hasn't worked in American corporations.
Yeah. And where do you see the future of leadership going? I know that it seems that holistic approaches and more mindful, authentic, heart centered leadership is definitely being talked about more. Do you think that, because this is what I'm seeing, and just let me know your thoughts. I see a need, a desire for heart centered, vulnerable leadership. I also see a large group of people who lack the awareness to understand how to really connect to that. So, what they're doing is they are trying to mimic the actions, the words, the movements of an authentic, heart centered leader. And I see trust starting to deteriorate because people don't know who to trust. It's kind of the wolf in sheep's clothing. And I know I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think that's so important that we understand the difference between genuinely being genuine and masquerading as being genuine.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think you really hit the nail on the head that leadership is moving from kind of a skills based or knowledge based authoritarian position into that heart centered leadership role where it's more about connecting with the people in your team and your vendors and everyone you work with on a deeper level.
Mhm.
And I think we're seeing that with this great resignation going on. Workers don't want to be a number. They don't want to just show up and make widgets all day without some kind of connection. And I think when a leader can inspire people from the heart to be the best that they can be, to explore their edges, to do things they never thought they could do in a safe environment, I think that's where we're seeing the companies with the biggest innovation, with the
Mm-hmm.
biggest creativity. That's where it's all going. And the more that we see of it, the more that's going to become an expected part of culture. And the companies that want to stay with the authoritarian knowledge based model, they're going to find themselves turning over employees relatively quickly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, what do you see the turnaround time being for this big transition? Because to me, I see kind of like a corral, like this little narrow funnel where you only have a certain number of people like you, specialists, to help people get to that level that are qualified to help people get to that level. But then you have this mass of people trying to get there, right? And so it's going to take time to develop that next generation of leaders. Because you've been coaching for quite some time, I know everyone's different. Everybody gets there at their own pace, but when do you see this being like a major shift that people are actually there and ready to act?
I think it's already underway. I I've worked with I have coached mid-level executives in large pharmaceutical companies, in U.S. government, and they want the change. Now they may not be entirely in a position to affect changing a company with 50,000 employees. That's returning a cruise ship.
Yeah.
But there's these people in key roles that are managing teams that are bringing this in and that are having an impact. At the same time, we're seeing more and more entrepreneurs and solopreneurs coming forward with their vision and how they can be better and be the leader that their teams need. And that's feeding it. I think that the large corporations, the public companies, they're going to be the last ones to change, but it's happening. It's coming from the inside out. There's thousands of people involved in these programs at major high tech companies, like I said, pharmaceuticals, governments. The tide is turning, and I think it's, if I had to throw a dart, maybe 5 to 10 years is kind of the critical mass where we'll start to see this. But it's already creeping in. There's 360 feedback is something that was unheard of 10 years ago, and now it's pretty much standard practice with most companies. So that being able to give a manager confidential feedback from anonymous feedback from his team that's a tremendous tool. So it's starting, and I think we're going to see more and more of it.
Interesting. So you mentioned, more entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. With this great resignation, how do you think that's going to change the dynamic with, these larger organizations? Because some of them are already outsourcing people. They've been outsourcing work for, a decade or so. But do you think that that's going to become the norm, that let's say I'm a freelancer who does development? Are they going to just hire freelancers? And then, how is the training going to work with that? Would the freelancer have to hire a coach, or would that development still come from the organization? How do you see the future of work being handled in the health and well-being of employees and or freelancers being taken care of, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think that's a really good topic to explore, and I think it's kind of a mix that companies can provide certain amenities to freelancers or contractors where they're included in holiday celebrations, or they get a birthday card like everyone else, that kind of thing. That's easy for a company to do, but it creates a strong sense of inclusion. And not the freelancers aren't the only ones that see that; the employees see it too. At the same time, I think the freelance and kind of the gig economy, that's getting bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where I do find myself coaching more entrepreneurs and solopreneurs, because people would rather be on their own. They'd rather work from an RV in the middle of the Rocky Mountains
Yeah.
and take the jobs they want, take the projects they want, and leave the other ones behind, and work where and when they want. And I think for those people, yeah, individual coaching and programs are readily available. There's so much out there in terms of self-development work and online courses, and all kinds of different programs that they could get involved with. So I do think it's both.
Yeah, that's a good point. I used to be a freelancer uh, after high school, and the company that I was working with didn't allow, their freelancers to attend their parties. I guess you could call me a temp, because I was working through a temp agency. But the manager that I was working for invited me anyways. And so I thought that was like really cool, because, the company as a whole excluded, but I guess individual managers can make their own decisions with that. But so let's talk about conscious leadership, because we've already hit on it without saying what it is. But define conscious leadership and how you go about teaching someone or showing someone how to be conscious and mindful when they lead. What does that look like? And how is it different? How is being and doing very different when it comes to that?
Yeah. I think it really starts with intentionality. And by that, I mean that the leadership style is it's not just what the leader or the manager defaults to. It's they're bringing a certain style to the team or to an individual based on what's needed in the moment. It's situational leadership. So, and I think it starts with that. It's also how aware is a leader of how their behavior and speech is impacting the people around them.
Mm-hmm.
It's a matter of kind of like taking off the blinders and being willing to accept feedback and viewing feedback as a gift, and really asking for it, with something like a 360 review, or there's other ways to do it. So it's really a matter of being mindful of the impact of what you're doing versus the intent of what you're doing. And
Mm.
every leader wants to grow their business. They want financial success for the company. They want to see their people grow. That's their intent. Their actions may be having a different impact on the people they work with, and their customers and all of the stakeholders. So it's a matter of kind of being mindful of all of that, seeing what's going on, and really understanding it from an outsider's point of view. And that ties directly back to mindfulness practice, where you are objectively watching your thoughts without judgment, without um, preconception, and just seeing what's going on there. It's that curiosity that, one of the most dangerous things my clients can say is, "Oh, I know that."
Mm.
Well, do you
Mm-hmm.
really? How do you know that? What could another reality look like for someone else? So,
Yeah.
I think that's where the mindfulness part jumps into the conscious leadership part, where it's that curiosity, that observation, and looking at impact.
Yeah. Curiosity is a big key part of that. And you also mentioned being able to kind of separate yourself from it's like detaching from your ego. Your ego wants, it's like a magnet. It says everything that you say is a direct attack at me, everything's flying at you. But when you just kind of observe it objectively, again, like you said, without judgment and with curiosity, you can learn so much about yourself and realize that it has nothing to do with who you are at your core, right? We often identify as our ego, but we're not our ego. Our ego wants us to think that we're it, but we're completely separate. Um,
Right.
and
Right.
mindfulness practices and meditation can really help you distinguish the difference between your true self and your ego.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's 9 times out of 10, that's kind of the model behind someone being stuck on a decision or on a goal, where, when you really start to look at it, let's say you want to go find a new job, but you're stuck. You're not out there interviewing. You're not sending your
Mm-hmm.
resume out. What's the competing thing in there that's stopping you from doing that, right? Is it a fear or an imposter syndrome thing, or if I get a new job, I'll have to work a lot harder. I'm, really happy where I am because it's easy and I know the job, and whatever. There's so often a really, really deep part of ourselves that we're protecting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly right. That's the ego, and that kind of grasping onto this self identity that we have,
Mm-hmm.
which, despite what we may wish, is always fluid.
Yeah. When you talk about the jobs, Matt, it makes me think about when I was working in at Food Line corporate, and I was so new, but I wanted to get this, higher up manager position that I was not at all qualified for. But I would apply for these jobs based on what perks I got, how much it paid, and I would just apply. And then I would try to find a way to make myself seem relevant and competent for the job. And then I would get so upset when I wouldn't get it and someone else would. And I'd say, "Oh, what do they have that I don't?" Well, a lot of experience, first off, but we can easily just get wrapped in our heads, and so we can get tunnel vision and only see what we want to see. And that is dangerous. That is dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like with things like that, it may seem like innocent, but when we look at society today and the narrow focus that we have on reality, and reality is going to be different for all of us. We can't ever have like an absolute perspective of reality. Um, but we can definitely expand it far more than what we have currently. But we have to be willing to open up to the idea that we may not be right about everything. And that's very challenging.
Yes, it is. It is. And it's something that we need constant reminding on. And I think a regular mindfulness practice will do that. And also the kind of culture that a leader wants to create in their company. If it's truly an open, trusting, safe environment, then that kind of thinking will be it'll come up. You'll see it. And
So, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Do you want to continue before I jump in?
no, that's okay. Go ahead.
So when you work with leaders, do you just work with leaders one on one? Do you work with a group or a team? And how do you do these practices with them? Like, what does that look like? Do you do a
Mhm.
group meditation? Do they do the meditation on their own and then you coach in between?
It can be both or either. I do a lot of individual work, and that is really it's very customized to the individual, and that maybe they have a practice and they just need some accountability around keeping it up, or I'm happy to teach them how to meditate as well and work on that. So at the individual level, it's really structured to what they want to accomplish and what they need to do. I don't really bring a structured program to that. In a group setting, it can be a little more challenging because there's always different levels of
Mm.
awareness and acceptance of it. To be honest, there are some people that don't want to meditate, and that's fine. There's other ways to develop that consciousness, but in a group setting, we have to accept those different levels of engagement, and um, that can be challenging because you want it to be a shared tool for the team, but usually it works out, and people will find a way to kind of expand their mind a little bit and open up to it and try to see things from a different perspective. And in a group coaching situation, that can get really interesting with the dynamics at play
Yeah, I'm
and
sure.
creating that safe environment, and what does it really take to hold that space.
Yeah.
So I would say I think both, because on the individual level we can go a lot deeper, a lot faster,
Mhm.
but on the teamwork scale, I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the road, and where a lot of those skills are a lot more needed.
Yeah. And do you find that the people that may be a bit resistant in the beginning, because we tend to gravitate towards the group, right? Like whatever the majority of the group decides or feels or does tends to draw that other person in. Um, do you find that there's like a sweet spot of a certain amount of time within the group or the program that you start to see a shift? And it may not be the same shift you see in other people, right? Like you said, everybody moves at their own pace, but do you find that they're less resistant as time goes on?
I think it really depends, and if the goal is to create more self-aware leaders, conscious leaders, mindful leaders, then that may be a skill isn't important to some people,
Mm.
or that's not a path they want to follow. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, some people do come around, and I think it's always interesting working with someone that's new to this kind of work, because if it's really embraced, it can be like a week or two of just some regular practice and a couple coaching sessions, and there are significant changes right off the bat. So I would say that the level of, well, I would say you get out of it what you put into it, and you get
Mm-hmm.
out of it, the more open you are to it, and to coaching, and to meditation, and to change. The faster and the stronger the results.
Yeah. You had mentioned in the beginning about how you've seen a shift, not just with leaders in regards to leadership, but taking that home and applying that to their personal life. Um, do you have any stories that just kind of, I don't know, really touched you that they're like, man, this really saved, my marriage or really improved my relationship with my children, or my parents?
Yeah, yeah, sure. I think a lot of it is really the same. The
Mhm.
skills are the same, and the self awareness, it's the same. It's honestly a lot harder with the people we love, with our partners or children or parents, because there tend to be more ingrained patterns and histories than there are people we work
Mm.
with.
Mhm.
So it actually gets a little juicier the more personal it gets. And
Interesting.
yeah, I think some of the biggest points of growth can be when you're, say, working with your partner on an issue, on some home problem or something, and you kind of have that space to open up and trust. And certainly in a committed relationship, it can really, really deepen it, and build a whole new level of trust and emotional intimacy.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, how it's more challenging with the people that we're closest to. And when I think about that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's so much easier to talk to a stranger and admit your faults than it is to talk to your family and friends, significant other. But then on a deeper level, it's even harder to admit to yourself when you're wrong and when you're flawed and be honest with yourself.
Yeah,
Um, wow. Yeah, that's a really good point. A deep introspection there.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And it seems like we're asking people to work, from the inside out, which is super important. So it's kind of like that's the hardest part though, right? So let me ask you a question based on that, because we talk about the doing and the being. And for me personally, I realized it first started with me doing things. I didn't really connect with it, but I was doing it and I got some results and I got a little bit of traction and I kept doing it. And then later came the being. But I feel like what many of us are lacking right now is that being, which is the hardest part. So do you think there is a certain process that makes it easier to integrate into this new state of conscious awareness? Do we start being first, or we start doing first, or does it really just depend?
I think it really depends. So there are so many kind of roads into that level of personal growth, and someone may be very intellectual and want to read a book about it. Someone may be very tactile and hands-on, and they need to experience it firsthand. There are all different ways in. I would say that I don't know that you ever get there in either case. The way I like to phrase it is, personal growth is like an onion. You keep peeling, and there's layer after layer, and with each layer, there's more tears.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, It's kind of that idea that
Yeah.
you're never there 100%. There's always work to do.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So excited announcement. This is the first time I'm announcing it. I'm going to announce it while you're on here. But there's a new magazine that I'm launching, Emotional Intelligence Magazine. And Matt is listed as one of our EI specialists. So you can not only find him on the other links that I'm sure he's going to provide that will be in the show notes, but you can also find him there as well. So how would you like for people to connect with you? And I'll make sure to put all of that in the show notes for them to learn more.
Sure. Yeah. Visiting my website is probably the best. That's at illustraconsulting.com. It's ELUSTRA consulting.com. And you can read more about me. I'm a very prolific blog writer, and be happy to connect with anybody if you'd like to.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this.